ARM has just released a report, and the brewery industry, interestingly, has been one of the top performers in the Nigerian stock market this year. Joining me in the studio to discuss that report is Seun Oyegunle, brewery analyst at ARM Investment Managers. Thanks, Seun, for joining us on the show today. So, just give it to us. What are the issues that you are looking at that might support a re-rating of Nigerian breweries?
Thank you, Wole. Nigerian Breweries earlier this year said that they were going to acquire 3 breweries from Heineken. Earlier in the year, Heineken had purchased 5 breweries from the SONA group, and the 3 breweries going to constitute about 2.9 million hectoliters. They received consent from their shareholders some weeks ago. Basically, we're looking at scenarios and seeing that this will play out in the case of Nigerian breweries. We looked at Nigerian breweries' balance sheet, looked at funding sources or possible funding sources, and basically thought that this could be a key acquisition for them, in that it changes the game for Nigerian breweries and the way we should be looking at Nigerian breweries as an entity.
And obviously, like I mentioned, many already thinking that valuations for this brewery sector generally are somewhat rich right now, simply because of the performance so far this year. But the key issue really is how they fund the transaction and, of course, the price, isn't it?
Yes. We don't have details about that yet, but what we did was to look at best case scenarios, or look at scenarios that we thought were conservative. We thought, because Nigerian breweries had just 12.5 billion naira in cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year, that would be the most feasible alternative. And we looked at it buying those breweries at about $170 per hectoliter. We arrived at that value by looking at recent deals on the African continent. Bedele Brewery in Ethiopia, you had also Hara Brewery in Ethiopia, and Serengeti in Tanzania, acquired by Diageo in 2010. We did a weighted average and came up with a price of $170 per hectoliter for the breweries, based on 2.9 million hectoliters, overall price of about 77 billion naira. And so when you have just 12.5 billion naira, you have to take some loans. What happens is that if Nigerian Breweries takes that money, we expect it to use dollar financing for that. And because of the low cost of debt, dollar financing, basically we see a case in which cost of capital decreases, and that's where the value comes from. Apart from that, going to lower segment of the market brings another growth perspective for Nigerian breweries. It was not in that market before, and we think that market can constitute about 35% of growth going forward. And so with Nigerian breweries' muzzle, it can take the acquisition, and then it's a whole new game.
I was just going to come to that. That's really what they stand to gain strategically from this deal, isn't it? Because that's an area that SAB Miller is looking to penetrate into. Recently, we've seen them acquire a few breweries in Nigeria, and they're obviously looking to expand their scope. And effectively, this transaction tends to block any aggressive entry into Nigeria, doesn't it?
Yes, and that was one of the key things that we mentioned. SAB Miller had gotten that should have had about 12% market share, and then becomes the first to reckon with. Presently, SAB Miller has just 2%, and basically it's not going to change much in the near term. And so you still have 2 key breweries. What Nigerian Breweries is doing now is consolidating, just not in the top and lower end, but in the in that mainstream end too. And so what it has access to those markets, you talk about things like economies of scale on the sales side in terms of acquiring raw materials, and those are the synergies that we see that coming from that deal.
Let's look at taste and trends with regards to demand, consumer demand for beer in general. With the economy growing at 7%, obviously middle class seems to be strengthening with some increased income. What are the trends that you're seeing with regards to beer consumption in Nigeria?
I think more like any other industry, it's a play on the consumer sector in Nigeria, as a pure play beer sector. And so basically it's a play on the population, on the rising incomes. And the trend we're seeing is that people are trading up into higher value beers. So you had people in the informal sector trading down to the lower tier, and that's what we're talking about, the low breweries. And so you have people from that tier to trading up to beers like Star and Guinness. And so that's the trend we're seeing. We think as rising incomes continue, we're going to see that trend. And I think the story is not over in the Nigerian brewery sector. Between 2001 and 2010, Nigerian breweries grew sales at a compounded rate of 25%. And you have to look at it in that era. We don't still have full power, basically our democracy is still taking up shape. I think the next 10 years will be phenomenal for the brewery sector. Those who think that the party is over, I think they are still in for a surprise, and we see positive surprises on the horizon.
Well, obviously, SAB Miller doesn't think so, and that's probably why they're coming to Nigeria now.